All right, good morning. Let's pray. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty and everlasting God, whose will it is to restore all things in thy well-beloved Son, the King of kings and Lord of lords, mercifully grant that the peoples of the earth, divided and enslaved by sin, may be freed and brought together under his most gracious rule, who liveth and reigneth with thee and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. So those of you who have already heard the sermon heard me mention that I didn't want to preach on the two selections for this morning from Revelation and the Gospel of John. So I feel some level of obligation to go over them a little bit this morning. So we'll start with the reading from Revelation. This is, of course, the Revelation of St. John the Divine, or the more fun title, The Apocalypse of John. I'm going to rant for just 5 seconds here, but it's a pet peeve of mine when people say the book of Revelations with an S. It's singular. It's one revelation. The revelation is Jesus Christ. So John begins, grace to you. It starts like a letter, right? It kind of starts as a letter and then it kind of transmutes into something else. But he begins, grace to you and peace from him who is and who was and who is to come, and from the seven spirits who are before the throne, and from Jesus Christ, the faithful witness. Now the word witness is a form of the verb in Greek martyreo, which also, what does that sound like? Martyr. It sounds like the word martyr. So the initial meaning of the word martyr was to be a witness, but it eventually came to mean specifically someone who died for the faith. So the faithful witness, the firstborn of the dead, and the ruler of kings on earth. And that's sort of the big takeaway that they drew in thematically for Christ the King Sunday. Firstborn from the dead. Has anyone ever had a Jehovah's Witness come to your door, knock on the door, and say, hi, I'm from Jehovah's Witnesses? Anybody? I've got a show of hands here. What kind of stuff do they say to you usually?
Not much.
Not much? You shut the door? You say, they're like, you're beyond hope. No, if you're Episcopalian, no. Anybody else? They talk about Armageddon in the last days. A big thing for them is without getting too technical, they're old school Arians. And do you know what an Arian is? And I'm not talking about the Nazis. I'm talking about something else. It's talking about a dude named Arius in the early church. And his big slogan, his tagline was that there was a time when the sun was not. And he argued that Jesus was the most powerful, the most glorified, the most exalted, anointed creature of the Father. But that there was a time when Jesus did not exist. But of course, we confess in the Creed that Jesus is eternally begotten of the Father. But the Jehovah's Witnesses will point to passages like this, where it says that Jesus is the firstborn of the dead. In Colossians, Jesus is called the firstborn of all creation. They'll say, see, Jesus was the firstborn. He was a creature. But what would your response be to a Jehovah's Witness if they brought that out as a point to you? You can leave now. That's one option. Look at the first chapter of John. The tricky thing with Jehovah's Witnesses, as you may know, is they have their own translation of the Bible. It's called the New World Translation. And of course, when it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was, and in their translation it says a God, as in a created divine being, just one of many angelic creaturely beings. So that's how they get around that. They'll say, oh yeah, we'll say that. I'm a little bit cheeky. When the Jehovah's Witnesses came to our door once, it was on a Saturday, and I was playing with my kids, and they came. I forget. Callista was doing something. I don't remember what. I think she was probably working. Yes, that's the only time that I would be in charge of the kids like that, to my shame. But the Jehovah's Witnesses come to the door, and they, knock, 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 and They give their spiel, and I just look at them. They always go 2 by 2, and it was fall, in Savannah, which of course is like a freezing 65 degrees or something. But they were both wearing like pea coats. And I let them do their spiel. And then I looked them right in the eye and I said, "But who is Jesus to you?" And they stopped. And the older woman of the two, who obviously I think had been in the Jehovah's Witnesses church longer, she said, "He's my Savior. He died for my sins. He rose from the dead." And then she stopped, and I looked, I said, "But is he God?" And she said, no, he's not God. And she said, "Well, if you look at the Greek of 1 John or Colossians," I said, "Oh, so you know Greek." And I went and I grabbed my Greek New Testament. And I said, "Oh," her eyes got so big when I said, "Oh, you know Greek." And the other woman actually, to her credit, had on her smartphone, she had a parallel Greek/New World translation right next to each other. But it's like, I'm going to translate the New Testament differently than you do. I'm not going to bore you with the grammar of why their translation of the first chapter of John is wrong. But of course, only the New World translation translates it as, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God." And so, or at the end of the Gospel of John, when Thomas says, what does he say when he puts his hands in Jesus' hands and in his side? He says, "My Lord and my..." They have to say that that Thomas was swearing right there, because he wasn't actually confessing that Jesus was God. Kind of ridiculous. But the idea of firstborn is another. Oh, and of course, those Jehovah's Witnesses never came back to our house after that. We got blacklisted from their door-to-door service.
Did you tell them?
I didn't tell them. I just surprised them. But the idea of the firstborn is another group of passages that they'll bring up to say, well, Jesus is a created being. He's the firstborn, right? And you have to understand, what is the significance of when Paul says in Colossians that Jesus is the firstborn of creation? Is he saying that Jesus had a beginning in time, or is he saying something else? What does the firstborn get in the ancient world? He gets the inheritance, he gets the blessing, all the rights and privileges. Everything goes to the firstborn son. That's part of the reason all the stories in the early chapters of Genesis around like Jacob and Esau are so surprising, because the exact opposite happens of what you would expect to. Jacob, being the younger son, actually steals the blessing from his older brother. That's a whole nother thing. But the point being, that for St. Paul in Colossians or here in Revelation, the significance of Jesus being firstborn is that all the rights and the inheritance belong to him. That's the significance of the firstborn. It's not that he was a creature that came into being at some point. So John goes on to say, the ruler of kings on earth, to him who loves us and freed us from our sins by his blood, and made us a kingdom, priest to his God and Father. To him be glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. And so you get this really robust, beautiful picture of the people of God as a kingdom, our identity as priests, those who offer spiritual sacrifices of worship to God. And it says, to Jesus, to him be glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. And then it says, behold, he is coming with the clouds. Now, is that imagery used anywhere else in the Bible of the Lord coming on the clouds? The disciples, when they see the transfiguration, there's also the ascension at the end, and the transfiguration is sort of a precursor to the ascension, Christ's ascension to the right hand of the Father. There's several points in the Gospels when the high priest Caiaphas in the Gospel of Matthew asks Jesus who he is. He says, behold, you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds with his glory. And he both identifies himself as the Son of Man and the one who comes on the clouds. And we don't fully appreciate the significance of that, but when the high priest hears that, he tears his garments and he says, we've heard all we need to hear. You need to crucify this guy for blasphemy. And that's because if you look, especially in the Psalms, as well as the book of Daniel, the idea of the only person who rides on the clouds in the Psalms is the Lord. And so when Jesus identifies himself both as the Son of Man and the one coming on the clouds, to Jewish ears, they know that he's claiming to be the Lord. And that's why Caiaphas gets so upset and rips his garments. So you see that imagery is coming up again in the book of Revelation, that behold, he's coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, everyone who pierced him, and all tribes of the earth will wail on account of him. Even so, amen. I am the Alpha and the Omega, says the Lord God, who is and who was and who is to come, the Almighty. Any questions about that passage? Perfect. It means I explained it completely. All right, let's move on to the Gospel of John. John 18, 33 through 37. This is a really interesting interaction between Jesus and Pilate. Sometimes you'll talk to people in some of the circles I came from. They'll be like, with the rise of postmodernism, truth became relative and everything's sort of been downhill from there. And you look in this interaction between Jesus and Pilate, and truth being relative is not a new idea. It's very old. Because at the very end, Jesus says to Pilate, he says, everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. And I don't think he's being sincere. I think this is sort of snarky. Pilate said to him, what is truth? Basically, I think he's reducing truth to whoever has the bigger sword and the bigger army, right? That's what's really going on there. So Pilate entered the praetorium again and called Jesus and said to him, are you the king of the Jews? And keep in mind, this is what Jesus has been accused of by the religious leadership of the time. He's going to create an uprising. There's already been multiple uprisings since Rome has occupied Israel. This guy is just another leader of a revolt. He's trying to take over Rome. And essentially the religious leadership is trying to get Rome to take out Jesus because he's a political threat. So Pilate goes to Jesus and he says, are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus answered, do you say this of your own accord, or did others say this to you about me? See, he already knows he's been set up, right? So Pilate answered, am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done? And obviously, the irony is, throughout the Gospel of John, there's these multiple layers of meaning and understanding. And so, in one instance, when Pilate says, what have you done? He said, obviously, you've really angered the religious leaders in the establishment, and they want you taken down. So, what did you do to deserve this? And at the same time, as you've been following the Gospel of John up until now, and you've seen all of the miracles, all of the teaching, you know that he's done quite a lot. So what have you done? He's made the deaf see, he's raised the dead, he's turned water into wine, he's done lots of things. So Jesus answered, my kingship is not of this world. If my kingship were of this world, then I would be like every other revolutionary leader up until now. My servants would fight that I might not be handed over to the Jews. But my kingship is not from this world. Former Bishop of Durham, N.T. Wright, Tom Wright, famous New Testament scholar, makes the point in this interaction that sometimes Christians will say, well, Jesus says his kingdom's not of this world or not from this world. And they'll say, therefore, Christians should not be engaged in civil life. And that is a whole complicated debate, and I'm not going to fix it here, of what does Christian engagement in politics and stuff look like. I think that's a very complicated question. But some people will use it to completely disengage altogether. And N.T. Wright makes the point, Jesus says his kingdom is not from this world or of this world, but it is very clearly for this world. Even if we're thinking of the church as outposts of the kingdom of God, where his kingdom has taken root and where more people are being transferred into his kingdom. And so he says, my kingdom is not from this world. And Pilate said to him, so you are a king. You are claiming kingship on some level. And Jesus answered, you say that I am a king. But he brings it back to his mission. For this I was born, and for this I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. And that connects back to the beginning chapters of the Gospel of John. The Word was with God. The Word was God. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. But people hated the light because their deeds were evil. So there's this, Jesus coming into the world exposes what everyone already knows is there, right? That things are not the way that they're supposed to be. You and I are not the way we're supposed to be. So, and then he goes on to say, everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. And then Pilate says to him, what is truth? I mean, really, it sounds like a politician, right? What is truth? It depends on what the meaning of is. Yes. So any thoughts on that passage, that interaction between Pilate and Jesus? Do you understand some of the tensions between Jesus' kingdom not being of this world, but being for this world? It's not a political kingdom. He's not going to use the sword, but he has come to bear witness to the truth and build citizenship in the kingdom of God. There's multiple dynamics going on here that we also see in the epistle lesson that I actually preached from. And so Jesus is very much in line with the prophets. They warn about idolatry, and they say, the idols have eyes, but see not. They have ears, but hear not. They have mouths, but speak not. And every time Jesus gives a teaching or talks about his identity, he always ends it with, he who has ears, let him hear. Pay attention. This is really important. And very much is picking up that prophetic mantle that you do actually have to see what he's getting at. And I think part of the reason he uses parables and these strongly rhetorical interactions is everyone he is interacting with has their own agenda. And they're trying to make either him or his kingdom something it's not. And the only way he can subvert that is by exposing what's really important to them. Because I think for Pilate, it's really all about power. He's like, the Jews want you out. What did you do? What did you do to tick them off so badly that they want you taken out? It's not clear to me based on my interaction with you. So you are a king. Well, where are you the king of? Because I'm the king of here. So you can't take over this place. But then he goes on to say, well, I speak the truth. And he's like, well, really, what is truth? Because for Pilate, I think, truth is, as I've said before, whoever has the biggest army. Truth is power. Power is truth. But of course, that's not the way of Jesus. Where does the mighty majesty and glory of Jesus get expressed the most? On the cross. In his self-giving love for the sins of the world. No Pilate, Caesar, Herod, Caiaphas, no one else is going to give their lives for the sake of the people over whom they're in control. He says, the lords of the Gentiles, they lord their power over them, but I come among you as one who serves. And so we worship this. If I added an addendum to my sermon, it would be that Jesus' kingship is a servant kingship. I think that's probably a good place to end. Thank you.